Hi there, and welcome back to rLounge. A death can really rock a family's foundation. It brings the best out in some, and the worst out in others. As parents, we can't protect them from hurt, but we can do what we can against gold diggers. Today, a deceased mama is rolling in her grave and supports her widower from the other side. My son stole his dead mother's ring for his girlfriend, and now he won't talk to me after making him return it. To say I was mad as hell would be an understatement. I, 46 male, have a son, Jake, 23 male, and fake name. Jake was a good kid growing up, so him doing this was a complete shock to me. I have a daughter too, Amber, 16 female, and also fake name. When my wife passed away from COVID nearly 2 years ago, she already had a will in place. She was immunocompromised due to a prior condition she was diagnosed with a decade before she passed, and she made sure she had a will set just in case anything happened to her. And in said will, she divided her assets between her children, and Jake got his cut as he was already 21. He used that money to put a down payment on a condo, and he also got his mother's car. But the will stated that my daughter was to get all of my wife's jewelry. That included a vintage gold ring with a diamond that had a light blue sapphire on each side of it. That ring has been passed down for generations in my wife's family. It was originally her grandmother's wedding band. Her husband was a jeweler and handcrafted the ring for her himself. And it was passed down to my wife's mother when her grandmother died, and then to my wife herself when her mother passed. And it, along with the other jewelry, was to all go to my daughter. When my wife passed away, my grief was intense, but I powered through it for the sake of my family, and they supported me 100%. So the betrayal from my son was just a rusty knife in the back to me. For the past 8 months, Jake has been dating Sarah, fake name. She has my son wrapped around her finger, and she loves jewelry and she adorns herself with it a lot. My son mentioned the family jewels my wife left his sister to Sarah one day, and Sarah really wanted to see them. So Jake went into my room when no one was home and showed them to her. He later admitted to me that he'd done this, and I was angry, but I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Jake came to me a week ago and begged for that ring from his mother's family jewels so that he could propose with it. He said Sarah had fallen in love with the ring when she saw it before, and he just knew it'd be the perfect ring to ask her to marry him with. He seemed completely convinced I'd be jumping for joy with him wanting to propose, but instead, I told him that I was not the one to ask as the ring belongs to Amber, and I wouldn't have him pressuring her to give it up either. For a fair chance, I'd allow him to explain his reasons and ask her for it once, but only once, without pressuring her, and if she refuses for any reason, that will be the end of it. Jake agreed and asked Amber for the ring right in front of me, but she told him no because she wanted to keep it in the family jewels and has always loved that ring. To her, it's priceless. She couldn't bear to ever give it up. I told Jake that was that, and to not press the matter further. Jake left looking very unhappy about not getting the ring, but I thought he'd let it go and look into finding a similar one. But he came back another day while I was at work to talk to his sister after she got home from school. He and Amber got into a huge fight about the ring, and Amber called me crying. I called Jake and told him to get out of my house and leave his sister alone. Jake yelled at me that he should have just as much right to the ring as his sister because my wife was his mother too. But I reminded him he got all of his mother's money and her car. The jewelry is Amber's, and only hers. He hung up on me, and Amber soon texted me that he left very angry. Later, right before I left work, my daughter called and told me that Jake came back. He walked in dressed in a suit, went into my room and took something, then left without saying anything to Amber. She tried to keep him from leaving, but he shoved her out of the way. I rushed home as soon as my shift was over and checked my wife's jewelry box. The ring was gone. I immediately called Jake, but he didn't answer. So I messaged him that I'll get police involved if he doesn't return the ring. Using it to propose won't stop me from taking it back. That finally made him talk to me, and he tried to say that I couldn't do that to him because he's my son. I said I can and will because he outright stole the ring, and he better bring it back or I will take drastic measures. Well, he phoned me right after that, and in a whisper, he said that it was too late. He'd taken his girlfriend out to dinner and proposed to her with the ring. He hadn't had it for more than an hour by this point, yet the ring was already on her finger. I said that was his problem. He stole the ring. He can bring it back. It's not his, and I will do whatever it takes to make sure it's returned. And if that means going to the police and blowing the whole situation up, then so be it. I'll file a report. I'll even get a lawyer. Jake started crying and saying I couldn't do this to him. I told him tough luck. He stole from both his sister and dead mother. I would not back down until the ring was returned. Jake wouldn't stop crying and making excuses. so I told him to have the ring back by morning, or I would be moving forward with legal action. Jake is my son, but he still broke the law, and I couldn't overlook what he did. He said he'd be by in the morning to talk, and ended the call while crying even more. Well, Jake did show up in the morning, and brought his girlfriend with him to try and guilt us. Turns out, she not only knew he stole the ring, she wanted to keep it anyway, because she was completely in love with the ring since she first laid eyes on it. I told her I didn't care. She could have a jeweler make a copy of it or something. But the original doesn't belong to her. It belongs to my daughter and deceased wife. Jake begged me one more time not to make her give it back, but I and my daughter stood firm. Return the ring or face police and maybe even a potential lawsuit. Jake's girlfriend pulled the ring off her finger and dropped it in my daughter's hand, called me an evil bastard, then left my house in tears. Jake started screaming at me that I may have just destroyed his relationship. I retorted to him that he did this to his own relationship by stealing a ring that didn't belong to him. What kind of son steals from his own sister and dead mother? This is beyond terrible. Jake had nothing more to say to me and walked out to follow his girlfriend. I didn't get anyone else involved in the situation, but Jake did. He tried getting support from friends and family, but he got the exact opposite reaction he'd hoped for. They were all mad at him over what he'd done. I got many phone calls and messages from people offering me condolences and saying they were not on Jake's side. I tried to do damage control, but now everybody knows. It's been a week now, and Jake's refused to speak to me. I've sent him detailed pictures of the ring just in case he wanted a jeweler to replicate it, but making a copy would be very expensive unless he used fake stones. And thus far, there has been no response. I don't know what the situation is with his girlfriend, if she even still is his girlfriend after what happened, but I still stand by the fact that Jake had to return the ring. I have since had all my wife's jewelry placed in a safety deposit box that only I have access to, and the jewelry will remain there until my daughter is 21, and may even stay there if she wants to keep it safe that way. I know I'm in the right to have reclaimed the ring. However, I don't want my son to hate me, and I don't want the family to hate him. If anyone has any advice as to how to better mediate this situation without me giving away the ring or spending a lot of money, I'm all ears. I know you have the right intentions of not wanting your son to be mad at you and not wanting to start family drama, but he's a grown man and he made the decisions that he did. He has to live with the consequences. You can't protect him from that. He could have made a replica, yet chose not to. He did break the law. He's acting like a spoiled brat. This may or may not have rubbed off from his fiancée. You need to put your foot down and stop going back to him and practically asking for forgiveness or reaching out to him. By doing that, you're just enabling the disrespectful behavior that he had shown you, his sister, and the wishes of his deceased mother. Moreover, your son is about to learn a valuable lesson in not always getting what he wants, as is his fiancée. If she doesn't stick around, that's not on you, and it's more than likely a huge blessing in disguise. Update. Over a week ago, I sought advice in another subreddit. Original is here. Well, my son's girlfriend, Sarah, has officially broken up with him. He's devastated and blaming me. Some previously pointed out that I gave him too much credit in saying he was a good kid. He used to be, but the person he is now, I just do not recognize. Whether he was always like this deep down, or if he just fell for the wrong person and let her change him for the worse, is a mystery to me, but it doesn't justify what he did. After I forced him and Sarah to return the stolen ring, she apparently spent days crying in bed, then told Jake that she didn't want a different ring no matter how much he told her he'd get her another one. She wanted my deceased wife's ring, and she couldn't imagine possibly having a different one for their engagement now that it had already been on her hand, even though it was only for a few hours and stolen. The last time I met someone who cried that much about being made to return stolen property, they were 4 years old. I heard more than one person say that they thought Sarah was being a big baby about it. The situation was no secret because Jake spilled the beans looking for support to the whole family and his and Sarah's friends. As previous readers know, that backfired badly for them. Well, after Jake's failed gambit for support, all the local drama lovers latched onto the situation like barnacles to a boat, and they kept messaging me with more information, even though I wasn't asking. So I was being kept in the loop even though Jake and Sarah weren't talking to me. My son had the pictures I sent him so he could try and replicate the ring and took them to a jeweler. The jeweler said he could make a similar ring based on the pictures, but he'd want to closely examine the original and take proper measurements to make an evaluation of the stones and metal in order to see what it'd take to make as close of a copy as possible. Jake waited for a while before swallowing his pride to call me again. His girlfriend was finally at least entertaining the idea of making a copy, but she wanted it to be an exact copy, down to the smallest detail. They called me a couple days after I made my original post and asked me to bring the ring to a jeweler to get a proper quote on the cost of making a duplicate. I agreed to take an extended lunch break and meet at the local jeweler. I got the ring from the safety deposit box and guarded it closely. I could see Sarah's eyes light up with greed the moment she saw it again. She reached her hand out and asked to wear it just one more time, then pouted like a child when I told her no. For all I knew, she'd take off running the second she had it. The jeweler looked at the ring very closely for a little while and said it was worth more than we thought, and the copy it would cost a lot. The ring was decades old and expertly crafted by my wife's grandmother sometime in the 1940s. The jeweler singed its praises even. The diamond and sapphires were decently large for an engagement ring, and the ring itself didn't use a slim gold band but a pretty thick and heavy one made of what was estimated to be 18-karat gold. But there was more. The stones themselves were set in platinum, and the ring had many ornate floral carvings on it. The stones alone needed to make an identical ring was more than Jake's current budget, and not including antique value. Making a copy of the ring like that with that variety of materials would cost a lot in time and labor because every part of it would have to be handcrafted. It was 5 times what Jake had saved. The best he could have done would be to make a down payment and then spend years in debt. Sarah enthusiastically wanted Jake to have the ring made anyway, but the cost was just too much. So the jeweler suggested they have one made that just looks the same. It didn't need to be made of the exact same materials. They could use a center stone that just looked similar to diamond and replace the platinum with a similar metal. I can't remember the name of it. But it would have reduced the cost by a lot. There was also a suggestion of looking for a modern ring that looks similar that's already made, which would be far cheaper as well. In fact, the jeweler already had 3 rings set aside that all looked somewhat similar with a central diamond and sapphires, and all very reasonably priced. Jake was all for either idea when Sarah suddenly slapped him while calling him a cheap, broke-ass wannabe, then turned on her heel to me and called me an evil bastard again for taking the original ring back because it had already been given to her when Jake proposed and should still be hers regardless. Then she held up her hand in the manner one does when they expect you to put a ring on their finger, and outright demanded the ring back while saying it was her right to wear it, and that my daughter wouldn't need it because it'd go to waste with her. She actually said it's not like my daughter would be doing the proposing to anyone since a man could just get a different ring for her someday. Oh boy, did that make me angry. And she clearly noticed because she took a couple of steps back. I looked her dead in the eye and said that my wife's family ring will never be hers. It wasn't Jake's to give away, and he knew it. That's why he went out of his way to steal it while I wasn't home, because he hoped I wouldn't demand it back if he used it. But neither he nor she ever had a right to it. Then I said that it's entitled people like her that are what's wrong with the world now. She acts like whatever she wants should be handed to her, and she's lusted after my wife's ring ever since Jake first showed it to her. That whole speech was a bit long-winded with some conjecture, I know, but I just couldn't hold myself back verbally anymore. My wife used to tell me that if I wanted to insult someone, I always figured out exactly what to say. After I said all of that to Sarah's face, she aimed to slap me too. But I guess the look in my eyes was enough to make her turn away and storm out instead, while very loudly making some sort of unintelligible tantrum noises that hurt my ears. She even intentionally knocked down a counter display on her way out. Jake was glaring at me with absolute rage, but didn't say anything until I asked him why he was with this awful woman, and he just said that he loved her and followed after. To his credit, she is very beautiful, but it's really just skin deep. Sarah wouldn't talk to Jake for a while, and then a few days later told him they were through because she felt like he didn't value her enough to get her the ring she deserved, and that she couldn't imagine having a miser like me as a father-in-law. She said she felt thoroughly humiliated by me, and cried that people all think she's a gold digger now, but I don't think they were wrong. I mean, she slapped my son just for suggesting they make a cheaper version of an expensive ring he could not afford. Then threw a massive tantrum just because I wouldn't hand over the original when she demanded it. That's the behavior of a gold digger if I've ever seen any. And while it is an assumption on my part, exactly how long would Sarah have stayed with my son if someone rich came along and swept her off of her feet? Would she have been inclined to still stand by him? Something tells me not so. I honestly feel like she just wanted the ring and nothing else. Right after the incident with a breakup, Jake did try to get in my house again while I wasn't home. To do what, I have no idea. But if I were to speculate, he may have been after the cash in my gun safe or thought the family jewels were still in the house. I hadn't told him at that point that I'd had them stored away in a deposit box, and I really didn't want to think my own son would break in for either of those reasons. But he stole from us once. He could do it again. Someone here suggested I replace the locks on my house, and I did, so Jake's key would no longer work. I'm looking into getting cameras put in now too. My daughter Amber called me after Jake showed up and said she was terrified while he was banging on the front door and demanding to be let in. I called his cell and he didn't pick up, but I guess it spooked him because Amber said he left right after his phone started ringing. He has a set ringtone for me, so he knew it was me calling in an instant. Jake called later that evening, but before he could start yelling at me, I demanded to know what the hell he was doing trying to break into my house while I wasn't home earlier. He scared his sister and she nearly called the police. Jake dodged the question by being angry about me changing the locks because I don't trust him. I said, dang right I don't trust him, not after what he did. Jake fired back that I couldn't just be happy for him, and that if his mom was still alive, she'd have wanted him to use the ring to propose. I saw red and said that if she wanted that, she'd have willed it to him. So he began whining and saying it was all my fault. He explained exactly what Sarah said when she broke up with him, and how she called me a miser, among other things. Then ranted about how I always thought Sarah was never good enough for him, but I pointed out he was putting words in my mouth. I never said she wasn't good enough for him. I barely knew Sarah, and I never once got in the way of him being with her till he stole the ring. He tried to deny that, but I asked him when I'd ever said anything bad about Sarah prior to the ring incident. He really sounded like he was thinking hard. But even he couldn't remember any actual time because I barely saw this woman ever while they were dating. I wasn't even aware that they were dating till at least 3 months had gone by in their relationship. But that was all besides the point. What the hell was he trying to get into my house for this time? He refused to answer, so I answered for him. I said if he was after the ring or any of the other family jewels, they've been moved to a secure, safe location only I have access to. And if he was trying to break into my safe or my emergency cash fund, there's no way he'd get it open. Or, if he was there to do any sort of harm to his sister, I'd kick his butt myself. I may have hit the nail on the head with at least one of those things because Jake just had a long silent pause on the line. Then he told me he's made up his mind to put in for a transfer at his job and sell his condo. He wants to move as far away as possible and never speak to me again. His last words to me were to have a nice life with my favorite child. I don't understand how my son has so completely changed on this level in just a year. I never actually called Sarah a manipulative gold digger until recently. I said she had my son wrapped around her finger and she loves jewelry. Though I guess that's not all that different in the long run. But in truth, she is a manipulative gold digger. Especially after the drama act she put on to try and keep a ring that was never hers. I mean, she spent days in bed crying over a ring she knew was stolen, and then had her huge tantrum at not being able to get it back or copy it. And now because of her, my son has chosen to wash his hands of me and his sister altogether. I am devastated. But at the same time, I'm furious that my son would do such things just to appease this witch of a woman he'd only been dating 8 months. That's not enough time dating before proposing. I dated my wife for over 2 years before popping the question. I shudder to think what things would have been like if that witch had married my son. I know Jake is going to blame me for a long time, and I'm not sure if we'll ever speak again. I hope one day we can reconcile. But for now, I think we need time apart. Amber is also very upset. She's extremely thankful I got the ring back for her, but she's just as shocked as I was that Jake has become like he is now. And she's referring to him as a brute for how he shoved her aside when he stole the ring, and also calling him a simp. Whatever that means. Thankfully, she has a great support system with me and the rest of the family, something I know Jake doesn't have right now. Multiple family members have called or messaged him to tell him off. And now his former best friend even came to me to apologize. He and Jake got into a nasty fight over what he'd done. And when his own best friend since elementary school didn't see things from his side, Jake cut him off too. Jake's ex-girlfriend Sarah also got in trouble with her own family. Her parents contacted me to ask for my side of the story and then apologize for their daughter's behavior. They only knew a small bit of what happened, but were appalled to hear about the way she'd acted. Like Jake, they said she used to be a much kinder person, but in the past few years, she's changed so much. They are severely disappointed in her. They were also covering half of the rent to her current apartment and are now telling her that when her lease is over, they will not be renewing it with her. She can either pay the full rent herself or look for somewhere else to live. And now she's going around cursing my name and saying this is all my fault. What is it with people these days? It's like ever since all those memes about entitled people on the internet have exploded, it just made more people like them. When I was Jake's age, I only saw people like that on rare occasions. Now they're everywhere. I've seen 2 in the local supermarket this year even. And they're spreading their toxicity like a flood on the world. I can only hope one day my son comes to his senses and finds happiness again. Whether or not he chooses to speak with me ever again, I'll hold out hope he'll one day return to being the kind person he once was. Time for some community reactions. First up from Fiona9. That's incredibly sad for you. All I am imagining is Sarah knew he bought his own condo, which is a big deal at that age, and probably thought he had plenty of money. Then he bragged about the family jewelry to impress her, and it just escalated. At least he isn't selling the condo to buy the ring. The OP replies, "You make a good point on that." Cadam Entanglement chimes in, There's also this trend, I guess it always has been, to try and emulate the wealthy and whatever it seems the wealthy are doing. This can be clothing trends, eating trends, home decor, vacations, cars, etc., etc. Like when Queen Victoria wore a white dress for her wedding, everyone else needed to wear white too from then on, even though wedding dresses before then were just someone's best dress. It didn't have to be white. Recently, one very insidious trend of wealth is to be rich enough to treat people like crap and be able to get away with it. Essentially, you're rich enough to get away with it. It's like a status symbol. Rich enough to face no consequences of bad behavior, just like you'd be rich enough to buy a $30,000 Hermes handbag. Flaunting bad behavior by those who have F your feelings money that can pay a lawyer to get them off with a slap on the wrist exploded because of social media. It's called clout chasing. And there are thousands of people who will buy something because a wealthy blogger or influencer celebrity mentions it, like, buy this tea I drink, and sales of it skyrocket. So you have all of these people fawning over the wealthy in a way that is incredibly pathetic, i.e. the word simp that your daughter used, and want to emulate these online presented rich people so they can look rich themselves. This is likely what happened to Sarah. So when it becomes trendy for the online wealthy to behave like entitled brats and Karens and face no consequences because money gets them out of the situation, their fans think they should do this too to look like them. So acting like an entitled, greedy brat is akin to chasing the wealthy people lifestyle. If they're acting this way and I act that way, then it'll look like I'm like them, rich and popular. It's just repackaged, I want to fit in with the popular influential crowd, angst. How can it end? Just doling out consequences for actions. Giving in to bratty behavior lets these delusional simps think they are right to behave that way. Make sure that they face consequences, either via public shaming or legally, will give them a wake-up call that is unacceptable to the community at large. Like you probably gave Sarah one of the best lessons you could give by making her face reality that she can't act like a bratty materialistic Instagram influencer and not face negative consequences. Silver Salem 101 chimes in next. Hopefully your son will reflect on his awful behavior and realize his mistakes so you guys can reconcile. I think you're right. His gold digger fiance would have dropped him the moment someone richer came along. Togar Sucks says this. Jake may be leaving town, but Sarah isn't, and she has a vendetta against you and your daughter. Locks are changed and valuables are already moved, but get some cameras for your house, OP. Celtic Tigress says, my brother was like this, met a girl, fell in love, and his character totally changed. Eventually, my parents made him leave our home after he and his girlfriend started bullying my sister. He blamed my parents for pretty much everything. He stopped talking to all of us. My parents were pretty wealthy, so we assumed this girl wanted a life she thought she would have with him, and when it didn't pan out, she left. Years later, he wised up, came back home, and he's actually a good person now. Be patient, and I hope your son comes back to you. PanPan90 says, it's unfortunate, but I think it will be for the best if it's not you who reaches out to Jake again. You're not the one who is to blame for the mess he got himself into, and that he won't take responsibility for it shows that he clearly has some serious growing up to do. He hasn't even apologized to his sister for terrorizing her and physically assaulting her. He should be begging on his knees for forgiveness and to not make a police report. That trip to the jeweler clearly tells you his crime is at least on the federal level for the US, and that's just for theft. But no, instead he picks a fight and taunts and blames everyone but himself for his woes. If Jake ever wants to reestablish contact, he knows how to find you. At this point, you are merely treating him like the adult he is by respecting his wishes to not contact him. He will probably call at some point to complain about that, and you can calmly tell him it was what he told you he wanted. He's an adult, and you're going to respect his wishes. It's not your job to clean up his messes or save him from the consequences anymore. It's his job to deal with himself. Your job now is to protect your daughter and enforce your wife's will. Let your daughter's school know that no one but whoever you approve are allowed to check your daughter out of school. If Jake was on this list once, get him off of it. Now, check your local laws and the school policy about surrounding pepper spray. If it's illegal, get something called farb gel and still check laws surrounding it. Pepper spray where I live, you're required to report you sprayed someone. Until Jake moves and Sarah moves on to the next sucker, your daughter should be prepared to defend herself. Because Sarah's a witch and feels embarrassed, so I wouldn't be surprised if she gets vindictive. Please tell your daughter that if Jake shows up at the house again and you didn't tell her he was coming and she feels threatened, she can call the cops on him. No more free passes. Also tell her that if she wants, she can either send Jake's calls to her voicemail and have you listen to them, or just block his number and block him on all social media. She will need you to tell her she can take that out, because otherwise she might feel like she's a terrible person who broke up the family. She needs to know she did nothing wrong and that it was wrong of Jake to treat her like that and steal from her. So reassure her that if she wants to, it's okay to block him. I also hope that eventually she may make an exception about wearing her mother's ring when she gets married. Hopefully having it on her special day to feel like her mom is there will remove the stink Sarah left on it. And prenup so the jewelry stays with your daughter, because covering your butt is never a bad idea. I'm sorry for the loss of your wife and for your son's selfishness. You were right. If their mom wanted him to have the ring, she would have left it to him. Good luck to you and your daughter, and I hope your son figures this crap out. Your son will speak to you again, OP. He's just caught up in some childish behavior and some strange growing pains that he should have experienced earlier. He's a late bloomer, but that's okay. Moreover, a lot of times anger comes from somewhere else. Our emotions blend together. Because he lacks emotional maturity. I'm sure he's experiencing more shame and guilt than anything, but it's coming out as anger. He thought he was making some adult decisions by getting engaged, but it takes a lot more than that to be an adult, and your son had to learn the hard way. He has a lot to learn. In fact, your family has been shaken by a major death. It takes time to heal from that. My guess is that your son still hasn't gotten over that, and perhaps he's stunted at an emotional age when he experienced all of that trauma. You're doing the best you can, OP. We're rooting for you. Update 2. My son's ex was obsessed with the ring. I'll start this off by asking that people please stop messaging me for pictures of the ring. I've gotten many asking me to see it for various reasons. Some even because they want a similar ring made as well. Well, I made my daughter aware of this Reddit account, and she's proud of me for doing it, but she doesn't want pictures of the ring online. And that's her decision to make because the ring is hers. I don't need to question her as to why. I just need to respect her decision. I also don't like the idea of posting pictures of it because if it gets copied by total strangers, then it'd no longer be unique. I was willing to let my son copy the ring because it was a family matter, but I won't be posting it for everyone to see and replicate as they please. I've already long deleted the pictures of the ring I sent Jake, and the ring is locked away in a bank vault right now. It will not remain there permanently as I intend to get a better home safe to keep it in when I can afford it. In the past few weeks since my original post, I did have cameras installed, and I'm thankful I did. For those wondering if my son and Sarah would get back together, no, they did not. My son is apparently really selling his condo, and he's not spoken to me since our last phone conversation where he told me to have a nice life with my favorite child after not getting his way. I have been to see my lawyer about my estate and got my will altered. I haven't written my son out, but he's lost a lot of things he would have otherwise inherited for the time being. After having some time to think, I've realized I just can't feel remorse for Jake anymore after his actions as of late. My daughter Amber calling him a simp seems to be an apt description, once I found out what that means. But I just don't want to be angry or sad about it anymore. Neither emotion is doing me any good. So for now I'm just going to do my best to let it go and move on. Jake seems to plan on moving on without us anyway. Hopefully in time, he'll understand what he did wrong, but I can't change his mind for him. I did run into my son's ex, Sarah, at a random place in town. She spotted me while I was with one of my friends in the middle of the local shopping mall. She called out to me while we were in front of a bunch of people and started booing me and calling me a greedy miser. I didn't really have to say anything to her because my friend laughed at her and called her a thief and a gold-digging witch who just wanted my dead wife's ring because she couldn't have it. I saw half the crowd turn to look at her at once when he said that. Sarah flipped us off and stormed away while cursing my name and knocking over anything in her path. This included a small child whom started crying in an instant. When she realized she'd hurt the kid, Sarah took off running. My friend and I helped the very pregnant mother of the child in calming the kid down, and thankfully the kid was okay. Sarah showed up at my house later to yell that it's all my fault her friends are all saying she's a gold digger now and won't hang out with her anymore. I said she is a gold digger because of what she did. She never had a right to my wife's ring, and she cried for days about it like a child, then broke up with my son just because he couldn't afford what she wanted. That's all something a gold digger would do. I'm not at fault just because she wanted my dead wife's ring so bad, and I'll make dang sure she never sees it again. What came next was more unintelligible screaming from her as she stomped back to her car. I'd hoped that was the end of it, but that girl just won't leave well enough alone. For those thinking Sarah and Jake's personality shifts were due to drugs, I'm not sure whether or not to tell you I'm sorry that isn't the case. It was all them, which in Jake's case is a harder pill to swallow because it means he has no excuse for such a radical shift in behavior. Sarah was arrested last week for attempting to break into my house. The cameras I had installed caught her sneaking into my backyard and trying to break in. She tried to break open my back door with an axe, and that tripped the alarm I had installed. She ran off, but the cameras in front of the house caught video of both her and her car very clearly in my driveway. She also left the axe with her fingerprints on it on the ground before she ran. When police got there, she was long gone, but they later found her at her apartment. They initially just wanted to arrest her for breaking my door and trespassing, but she went crazy on them and wound up getting pinned to the ground and frog marched out. This woman definitely has something mentally wrong with her. A few days after Sarah was arrested, I spoke to her parents again. They offered to pay for the broken door and then filled me in on some of the details, and it seemed drugs were not involved. They told me she was given drug tests at the station and her system came back clean, and since she wasn't on drugs, I don't think Jake was either. But Sarah was found to be very mentally unwell, so I guess it was just her crazy that was contagious. Her parents promised me that I'll never have to deal with her again, as they plan to move her out of town once they've dealt with the legalities of her situation, and they haven't contacted me again since. But I wouldn't say it's my business that they do either. I'm guessing, though, that Sarah likely needs major mental health treatment, so in a sense, I do feel a little sorry for her now. I knew Jake had to be aware of what happened with Sarah since everyone was talking about it, but he has not reached out to any friends or family. One of the people he works with has contacted me, though, and told me Jake is still openly very angry about what happened. He still believes the ring would have been a small price to pay for his happiness, but now that Sarah has been taken away, Jake has also shifted blame onto her, and saying she's the crazy gold-digging woman who ruined his life. It seems all he can do is blame other people for more. Until he accepts fault in his own actions, then I don't think we can have a relationship. He's not going to do well in life if he can't take responsibility for his own actions. I just hope that some time alone, wherever he chooses to go, will help him to mellow out and understand where he went wrong. This is likely to be my last update here, unless something else goes wrong. And if no new posts show up in the coming months or years, then you'll know everything is fine. At least as much as it can be, considering the situation. The community reacts some. Numerous Present 478 says, "Thank you for the update. You have the right attitude. You can't change his mind for him. I hope you can move on with joy." Nomad I-17 says, "You dodged a huge bullet. She could have been your daughter-in-law. I'm so sorry you had to go through all this. I hope Jake will one day realize how wrong his actions were. I sincerely hope life gets better for you and Amber." Corfiz74 thinks, "I thought we'd lost my older sister for good, and after 30 years in life had dealt her a couple of kicks in the butt that shifted her perspective some. She's back. Though now she has to live with the fact that after decades of running after her and being hurt and rejected, we're just not that interested anymore. Life is funny that way. Anyway, your son will probably be back at some point. Whether he'll have to come back to his senses will remain to be seen." Oh man, yeah. I honestly think she definitely had something to do with Jake's downfall, but he has to learn to take responsibility for his own crap. She's totally out of control. And no wonder Jake did whatever he could to get the ring. She fed him whatever psychotic juice she's on and sucked him into her downward spiral. I still believe you're doing a fine job and you can only do so much. I think what's important is that if and when Jake returns, you're there for him. Until then, he has to learn some serious lessons. He's got to run through the dark a bit. You can't protect him from that. Final update. My son just left town. I was hoping for no more drama or anything of the like, but it just didn't stop. Yes, Jake sold his condo. For how much I don't know, but he probably made a profit flipping it. And last Saturday, he pretty much just took whatever he could fit in his car and left. From what I know, the last few weeks have been hectic for my son. People all over town know what he did because the gossip train never stopped. At one point, Jake nearly got in a fight with a man at a bar because this guy called him out in front of everyone there. I tried to take the initiative by going to see him one last time. I hope maybe we could talk things out and make amends before he left town, because at this point I'd realized his moving away was the best thing he could do for himself. He'd already destroyed his own reputation, and he's better off starting over somewhere else. But when I got there and knocked on his door, he refused to open it. I tried to say I only wanted to talk, and he told me through the door that there was nothing to talk about, other than the fact that I ruined his life. There was a bit of a pause where he was only speaking intermittently. Then he suddenly went on a rant about the ring, and how I should have just let Sarah keep it. Then went on to say that I should have also offered to help pay for the copy, but it didn't matter anymore. Sarah was confirmed crazy, and they're through for good, just like he's through with me and his sister. Well, that got me mad, and I retorted that what he did was unacceptable. He assaulted his sister while stealing that ring from my house, for crying out loud. He's lucky I didn't have him arrested for that. And literally everyone who knew what he did was against him. That's the kind of red flag that shows you are in the wrong on a citywide scale. Then I told him to drop the act he's put up for the sake of his pride, I said that I don't know if he rushed things with Sarah because he missed his mother, or because he's now the age I was when he was born, or whatever other reason he could have. But the fact still remains that he knew what he did was wrong and just won't admit it. And I'm tired of trying to stick up for him. I didn't escalate the situation with anyone. He and Sarah did that. I'm tired of being blamed by him for his own wrongdoings. That's the sort of thing narcissists and cowards do. His mother and I raised him better than that, and he should know that his mother wouldn't have approved of his actions. But she's not here to say it. It doesn't matter who you are. If you steal something that's not yours, you can't go blaming the person you stole from for being mad about it and doing whatever they have to in order to get it back. There was a silent pause on Jake's end for a few seconds, and then he said, "F you, Dad." After he said that, I could hear him crying and hitting things inside. That's when I noticed down the hall that one of Jake's neighbors was poking her head out her door, and she went back inside the moment I looked at her. Yeah, this'll end up right back in the gossip train. Jake refused to say anything more to me, so I just left. But when I was leaving the building, a police car pulled up right in front of the condo building. 2 officers got out of the car and asked my name. When I told them who I was, they said that they had been called by someone in the building saying I was trying to break into their apartment. I said I had an argument with my son through his door, but I didn't once try to force my way in, and I only touched the door to knock. I told the whole story of what happened and then pointed out which neighbor had been watching and listening, and that the building had CCTV. One of the officers went up to talk to the neighbor, while the other detained me with cuffs. He was very polite and said that the cuffs were just to make sure, since they don't know who's telling the truth. I said he's just doing his job, and let me sit down on a bench nearby while we waited. The officer who went in the building called on the walkie after about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm not sure since I couldn't look at my watch, but he said that the neighbor's story more or less matched mine, and there was apparently more than one neighbor who was listening in who corroborated the same story. Then said he was going to talk to the building security and check the CCTV for that hallway. This took a fair bit longer. Again, I couldn't look at my watch. I just sat waiting on the bench near the entrance, but the kind officer pulled up a radio app on his cell phone and let me listen to it for a while to pass the time. The other officer finally called back on the walkie and told his partner to uncuff me because the CCTV had cleared me. He said that while the audio wasn't great, you could see and hear enough to show I never once tried to force my way in. I was uncuffed, and after the other officer got back, the two of them briefly spoke to each other for a moment and then asked if I was the guy whose son stole his dead mother's ring. I confirmed I am and asked how they knew. Then they both said that they'd heard about it through the grapevine, and after hearing my version of events, they put 2 and 2 together. One of them said he was in the office the day Sarah was arrested. Apparently she was acting like a wild animal trying to bite at them, and she made several threats from, "Do you know who my parents are?" to, "I'm going to castrate you." Although castrate isn't the actual word or words she used, I could only look embarrassed by it all. The officers told me to just go home, and that I was probably better off not coming back. I just nodded and left. I saw the police go back into the building as I was leaving, likely to talk to Jake. I know it was him who called the police because his neighbors messaged me later on social media saying that the officers gave him a solid chewing out for wasting police time to the point he was crying again. And I guess they also pointed out the ring incident and said that what he did was pretty low. I'm not sure how Jake took that, but it sounds like he heavily embellished what was going on when he called the police. And from the time I first arrived to when the police got there, he had to have called them right around when we started talking through the door. He's beyond lucky they didn't arrest him for calling them over under false pretenses. I went home and was comforted by my daughter Amber, and she told me I tried and it's not my fault Jake has gone bad, but it still hurt. I may have lost my son permanently. I ended up taking a day off work and locked myself in my office to play Dragon Warrior 1 on NES Simulator and eat vanilla ice cream to try and unwind. My son left town over the weekend. I may never see him again, but if I do, I hope he understands that I will always care about him. Yes, he wronged me, but I'm still his father. He could come to my door tomorrow wanting to talk, and I'd let him in. I just hope that day doesn't take 10 or 20 years. Added information. Some have wondered how small of a town I live in for things to have spread so fast. It's not a small town, more of an average-sized city, but one thing that made it possible was family. I come from a small family, but my wife came from one that's quite frankly huge. I'm not exaggerating. I can run into one of them at any given time just walking around or going to the store, and a lot of these relatives are the type to love gossip. And when my son went looking for familial support for his actions online, that's when the gossip train started. First they told Jake off for what he'd done. Then they started telling everybody they knew of what happened. I never wanted it to escalate like that, but it just did so on its own. It just turned into one of those 15 minutes of infamy situations for Jake and should have died down quickly. But my son's ex Sarah only made it worse by telling everyone she knew in order to try to get support. That basically doubled the problems as both of them lost all their friends over the situation. And so many people I don't know messaged me that I never gave my contact details to. I have no idea how they got them, but it doesn't really matter anymore. Now that my son has left, people have simmered down a bit. I managed to get most of the extended family to take down their social media posts about Jake within the first week or two, but by then the damage had already been done anyway. I put out the word asking people to remove any posts made about the situation and essentially begged them to just let this end. I didn't want to be in the spotlight. I just wanted things to go back to normal. But the escalation by both Jake and Sarah only made things worse. Also, some wondered about the guy who recognized Jake in a bar and started a conflict with him. I heard he was a neighbor of one of Jake's former friends, so it's no surprise he knew what Jake looked like if that really is the case. And yes, despite my age, I do enjoy some old video games. I don't own any of the old consoles anymore, but I keep some of the games I loved when I was young as ROMs to play on my PC. They're a good way to unwind once in a while. Neither of my kids have had an interest in these old games, and my wife never cared for them either, so it was pretty much just me that likes them. But I don't play them frequently anyway. I play through Dragon Warrior once or twice a year at most, and I usually play it fast with cheat codes because I am not a skilled player. Never have been. Even used the old Game Genie back in the day. The community reacts. Director Funny7970 first. What a saga. I'm so sorry for you and your daughter. Take care. Mogura de Giftu says, sad ending to a sad story, for now at least. Hope your daughter and you will enjoy time together. Fat Farty Pants 15 thinks, thank you for the update, OP. I can't begin to imagine the pain you've gone through, but please know I wish you and your daughter the very, very best for the future. And hopefully in time, when his pride has healed, your son will want to reconcile and you'll handle it in your own brilliant way. Good luck to you all. Defiant XX has the last comment. I'm sorry to hear that you still weren't able to get through to your son. Unfortunately, for some people, especially those with a wounded pride, don't wake up to reality for a long while, or in some cases, ever. I hope for your sake, your son isn't one of the latter. I don't speak to my dad for an entirely different reason than your situation, but at its core, it's very similar. You've gone out of your way to try to help fix the issue and try to resolve it. As someone who wasn't even given anything more than stonewalling and guilt tripping, please know you've done everything right by both your kids. Just leave the line of communication open to your son for when he's ready to talk. For the moment though, I'd definitely give him some space. Best of luck to you, OP. OP, my heart breaks for you. This definitely isn't easy. I can't imagine it being easy to see your son spiral like that, but he did it to himself. He's totally dealing with his own demons right now. Moving away from all of it is totally the best thing he can do for himself. He needs the space to grieve. This definitely all stems from the death of his mother. Stand your ground. Hurtful things are said and done when people are hurting. Be there for him when he comes back because he will come back. He just needs time. What are your thoughts? What do you make of OP's son's behavior? Would you have done anything differently? And thank you for joining us today on rLounge. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. See you next time.